Hello, everyone. It's Louis Yiakoumi from L Connect, back with another In Conversation With. And again, we've chosen a slightly different thing. I'm known for the automotive, logistics and supply chain sector, but I do like to look into other industries as well. So this time I'm very pleased to have as my guest, joining us in this conversation, Frank Baur from Diebold Nixdorf. And I'll let him introduce himself as well, not least because I'm not sure of his job title, so he's got many kind of aspects to it. And I sort of think of him as a COO, but I'm sure he's got a little bit to say about that. So welcome, Frank Baur.
Good morning, Louis. And indeed, my job title, if you look up to to the public homepage of Diebold Nixdorf, it's written EVP for Operational Excellence. And that is wisely chosen with the background of driving and pursuing operations towards excellence. So it's not the job title as many companies have. We are an industrial company. We are proud of our roots. But even more important, we are proud about the continuous improvement momentum, what we are driving in the company.
Okay. And you've worked in many different industries from, FMCG, automotive, obviously, which is where I got to know you. Sustainable energy. What's the kind of biggest lesson that you've carried across from all of these different sectors?
Look, Lewis, I would respond first off in many companies, in many countries and industries. Mm-hmm. And I would say what really resonates well at the end, it's about the tools, the principles, I would say, and they are in an operations world. And that's my passion since, closing out my chapter of university now more than 20 years ago. And it's truly about what I learned about the rigor and the focus and the disciplines. While the challenges are comparable and you can transfer knowledge easily. So that makes me, I would say, proud because at the end, my passion is operation and it's continuously improving.
Yeah. Okay. And you also worked, as I said earlier, in kind of sustainable energy. So when you were at GE Vernova, which is an onshore wind division of GE, did it change how you thought about sustainability in supply chains?
So first of all, being that part is, I would say, a recognized learning milestone where I will come to that most probably later. What matters to myself is be comfortable to uncomfortable, then you learn most. And as I transitioned into that industry, look, I needed to learn wind. And at that point of time, that business was all about scaling fast. You're highly dependent on regulations. And it's an industry, in my opinion, if I summarize it, what needed to be industrialized. And going back where I was coming from, as leadership principles to myself, it matters, and I would like to summarize it in 4 words. It's putting safety and people first, the quality of the process and the product right after. Then comes about excitement of customers if you deliver in time and most probably even faster, but very reliable. And then it's about the competitiveness and continuously improving your cost structure. And indeed, what makes the big difference in the wind business, it was about industrializing. In particular, my lessons to learn was putting quality truly first. If you just recognize these industry products are huge, if you have a defect, this costs you not just in a fixed assembly, no, in the field, even more. We talk about a 10x factor. And that was the time of my personal development where you truly get insights of putting quality first and to do it first time right. A discipline, honestly, I learned in automotive earlier, but applying that and being just as transparent to the cost of poor quality, I would say was my lessons. And for sure, in that part, as it was scaling the business, you want to scale it sustainable because you're in an environment where you do something better, because whatever productivity you achieve and get another unit out faster, better than planned, you do something good for the environment. So yeah, sustainability played a major role, and that keeps continuing on my journey.
Okay. And your kind of history, and even though you've gone beyond that now, you are kind of a supply chain guy almost. at heart, but you don't like the term, or you prefer a different term over supply chain, which I think you called it source, make, and deliver. What's the thinking behind that?
Look, sometimes words matter quite often, in all fairness. And to be specific is helpful because the supply chain, and if we as an industry did something most probably not very well, someone who was previously a truck driver calls most probably his environment today supply chain. Someone who is in a very technological environment, managing S&OP, S&OE, or maybe even business integrated forecasting, they would call himself supply chain. So to be more specific, I like indeed to talk about and to differentiate across source, make, and deliver, to be specific what we are talking about and not to get lost in, I would say, the word by itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And COVID, whilst it was a few years ago now, it seemed to change the world in so many ways, not least in supply chain. One of the things I used to try and preach before was that I couldn't understand why supply chain and logistics weren't taken more seriously in the boardroom, that we were kind of very much an afterthought. Do you think, that there were lessons learned in COVID that raised supply chain's role in the boardroom? And is that a good thing?
Look, sometimes it's good to look back to project the future. Mm-hmm. And you said already, I would say, operations by heart, but indeed, I started in logistics, in warehousing, right after university. I studied economics. And at that point of time, I want to drive impact. And that's why I went into supply chain, to innovate and to really lead and design the future. Mm-hmm. Many of my peers at that point of time went into finance, marketing, and they looked a bit, I don't want to say down, but I was an early believer. If you're in supply chain, you get to know the company well. So going back to your question, what matters to have in the boardroom, I would say latest with COVID, everyone learned quickly. Sometimes where many people have opinions to ship something from A to B is not as easy, especially in a constraint market. And also there, you need to be focused on, do I have the right risk measures? Do I mitigate them? Do I have what is now, I would say, even more on vogue, the right resilience strategy to keep my supply chain running? Because without supply chain, most probably no products got made, produced, or even delivered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a lady in Mexico who was new to logistics, but she was in the automotive industry and worked for a car maker. They said when she went to logistics, she realized the problems in logistics sound easy. Shortage of trucks, a shortage of drivers, getting something to the plant on time or whatever. She said, so the problems sound easy. You can make a list very easily and very quickly. Finding the solutions is actually the tough part.
I couldn't agree more. And now, as technology plays an even more important role in today's operations and supply chain environment, look, the competitive advantage comes if you own and strategize logistics the right way and take whatever kind of early warning signals you get out of lead time delays or I would say defects, if you call it, and get that into your planning environment. And then even, I would say, across the entire value chain, sourcing, adjust your production schedule up to delivery, give an early warning to your customers or to mitigate early because you need to change priorities. It's a competitive advantage.
Yeah. And you were, when I knew you, you worked for Robert Bosch and in the service parts side, the after sales and service parts side. One of the things I've heard from other industries is that they focus on the customer. The car industry doesn't necessarily do that. I think they're called car manufacturers for a reason, because almost the car manufacturer's main job is to manufacture the car, and kind of selling the car is very important, but I'm not sure it's at the forefront of the thinking. In service parts, it was about looking after the customer. So do you think some of the things that you've taken with you in the future are more about your role in service parts in the car industry as opposed to the automotive industry in general?
I would say, first of all, I enjoyed all phases of my own development because I will come back to that. And I quoted that, be comfortable to be uncomfortable. I started in fast-moving consumer goods, went to consultancy to learn and expand further. Then had the pleasure to spend time in OE, in automotive, as well as aftermarket. And you can transfer, as I said at the beginning, quite a lot. But what you learn with aftermarket, it's indeed wherever produced, you need to ensure the availability of the related spare parts at the right point of time. And you can't afford too much waste in that pipeline because it's a competitive environment. And here I need to say, managing that complexity, you learn your lessons.
Yeah. And it seems to me that sometimes the service part side is one of the most profitable sides for the car makers. But perhaps it doesn't seem, all right, and you worked at a part supplier as opposed to at a car maker. But I'm not sure it gets the respect and support it deserves because all of the effort goes into manufacturing. I think one of the issues for service parts was getting the parts. You were sort of second in line. Manufacturing got first in line to the parts, and then aftermarket was second in line to the parts.
Even there, strategizing that, I would say, is pretty important. And what I learned, my lessons being on the OE as well as aftermarket side, I say I take all that learning, even in today's environment, because it's applicable in various industries where you have an OE product and you want to bring that product and maintain it over life cycle, and their service and spare parts management plays a major role. And that is valid for my times and my chapter, what I had in aerospace, as well as today at Diebold Nixdorf.
Through the things that you've said so far, two things that stand out for me in how you've progressed is that learning is important to you. Forever learning almost is important to you, but also the importance of having the right mindset. Would you agree that these are two important kind of assets?
I can only respond with a yes. I would say if we look, and there are many studies, I like reading. The learning mode gets accelerated if you're, I would say, a bit of uncomfortable, because then you're in the growth zone. Yeah. And I think that would also be something where I'm back active currently, giving these a bit of back to next generation, even actively engaging in work at universities. I would call next generation workforce as supply chain, and we discussed the word before, is such a wide termination, early involvement in product development, NPI, strategic sourcing, down to maybe even indirect sourcing, where you touch the entire company to the make part and the deliver part. Change early, get your experience. It helped me a lot in my career development.
Yeah. One of my other kind of complaints about the automotive industry, and you kind of said it a little bit about yourself about when you were at university, was that the CEOs of car makers tend to come from finance, they tend to come from marketing. They very rarely come from logistics, purchasing, or supply chain. So it seems to me that role makes, or do you think that coming from supply chain makes good CEOs and even good CEOs in the future?
Look, the question is most probably not if, it's a matter of when. And we have enough industries example across various technologies where exactly that happened. And why I'm a firm believer into that, and was most probably an early believer and quite often left alone, but you see it more and more. It's just about you get to know the product, you get to know your bill of material, you get to know the supplier structure. You need to get to know, to handle the demand signal well, the customer side, the market trends. And then, supply chain wouldn't work without cross-functional engagement. And that's nearly all functions of a company. So I couldn't be more excited to promote supply chain further, because if you're starting your supply chain track in your early journey where you choose your university, hey, that can be a very straight way to be a COO or a CEO of companies, because you know the company better than anyone else.
Yeah. I remember quite a few years ago, I met the head of supply chain for a major car maker, was previously the CFO of that car maker. And when he went to become the head of supply chain, I saw him quite early in his role there. And I said to him, if the CFO comes into supply chain, it means it's all about cost cutting. That's why you've been brought in. And he said, no, it's the opposite. He said, as the CFO of the company, I touch all areas of the company. I touch manufacturing, I touch design, I touch sales and marketing, I touch manufacturing, I touch purchasing, I touch all areas of the company, collecting information, and then sending out the information again back out to all the different departments. And he said the CEO of the company at that time felt that that was the role of the supply chain manager as well, to also touch all parts of the company, collect information, and then send out from there the various results of that information collection. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, look, I would respond to that and say, position supply chain clearly as a value generator and not as a cost model. And I give you a good example in Diebold Nixdorf, and my chief supply chain officer was just recognized even internationally because he does. You can drive margin expansion, EBITDA growth out of supply chain. And then it's far more value generation to a company than cost cutting. So deep and by heart, yes, please position it the right way if you engage. We are, meanwhile, in the boardroom. COVID gave us the chance, you said it earlier. Now let's remain in the boardroom. As supply chain leaders, I would encourage everyone and position supply chain as the value contributor and not just as a cost element of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And moving on to technology, I suppose the subject, well, maybe geopolitics is the subject at the moment, but AI. Do you think AI will have a big impact? And where will AI potentially have the biggest impact in supply chains?
Look, if I lead across the dimension of people, process, and technology. And if we are just, I would say, self-reflect critical, it most probably impacts all three dimensions. What I would put first is, I would say, it impacts most the people, how we engage. But now I want to do a step back and just quickly talk AI. AI is perceived in the market quite often as gaining productivity and efficiencies, and a bit similar to supply chain, what we discussed earlier. I would encourage you, please stay focused to position AI as value generation while gaining efficiencies. Otherwise, it gets a pretty negative touch. And in supply chain, I would say, know the known, but there is so much unknown. Because at the end, where this technology can play a major role, be even a disruptor, is not known to us. So here, I would say we as leaders need to accept, most probably, engage early, engage deep, engage fast, but also accept to fail fast, because not every project, not every initiative, what we currently start in AI, might deliver the value you expect. It's a bit of different leadership approach needed than previous project management, where we grew up in our generation and use next generation talent.
Yeah. Okay. And you spent some time in automotive, as we've discussed. Is automotive a great place to learn about logistics and supply chain? Is it a great place to pick up logistics skills that you can then take with you to other industries? Is it still, at one stage, it used to be considered the gold standard? Automotive was a gold standard in logistics. I'm not sure that's the case anymore, but is it still a great place to learn and to move into as you want to progress in supply chains?
I want to go back to my earlier perspective. First of all, get to know the value chain in, I would say, quickly across entire source, make, and deliver. And automotive is a really phenomenal part because they have all components. Strategic sourcing plays a major role, as well as even more and more local for local production. And that requires a robust supply chain strategy. And at the end, a manufactured car, and you told it nicely, is nothing if you don't bring it in an efficient way to the customer who values that. So yes, I would say automotive is still, and what excites me even more in current environment, it might not be the automotive manufacturer as of yesterday, but more and more the new ones playing a role, because they are, with my outside perspective now far more customer-centric than ever, bringing in the user experience. The product lifecycle starts to be shorter, and that just gets in a new dynamic into that industry. And I would recommend everyone who thinks about starting the supply chain career, look to automotive. I would be very supportive.
What about the suppliers? And in general, I'm talking about, logistics, technology providers to, again, I'm thinking of the automotive industry. But how should they change for whatever industry? If you became the CEO or COO or head of global excellence at a major logistics company, or what do you think they need to learn or to change to keep up with a global supply chain world?
Look, first I respond and would say, let's ensure that the daily basics get done well, build a robust foundation operating system that you can, and then it's all about engineering out waste in whatever sector you are. That gets back to my own belief of continuously improving. I'm not the one who thinks in big initiatives. It's really about the incremental improvements per day to win the day, the week, to deliver the month. And if you do that even 3 times, you won the quarter. And if you do it 4 times, you have most probably the annual operating year. So stay focused on doing the basics right, and then lead by innovations. Solve the difficult problems as leader and bring in the topic of technology. Because if we don't innovate from the top of the house, the company or in whatever sector you are will not do. And that is valid particularly for the logistics industry. I think who was not most agile to innovate. There is still a container, most probably one of the larger innovations, but meanwhile a bit outdated.
Okay, and what advice would you give to someone, yourself at university or whatever, starting in the supply chain today?
I don't want to be repetitive, but I would say start in supply chain and don't get too comfortable, rotate quickly. There is a tremendous advantage to get to know the product. This you learn by engagement into NPI and strategic sourcing. To strategize your suppliers, you learn best in procurement, but don't miss the operational, at point of impact experience to be in manufacturing, where it's all about to win the day and really get the workplace in an environment to eliminate waste. There are great tools out of production systems, out of the lean toolbox I'm a firm believer into. And if you're doing that, you can't ignore the logistics part, the delivery part, because without getting something from A to B, either globally or within countries, it wouldn't work. So my advice would be rotate quickly across source, make, and deliver. It's an exciting journey because this talent I currently see missing in the market. So don't get stuck too early in one part of supply chain. And then I just want to close out. Hey, be comfortable to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There will be new things like technology. And we don't know where this journey ends. And most probably be even comfortable to fail early. My advice is just don't fail with the same or identical defect cluster a second time.
No, that's great. But I do really think that the advice you just gave about, learning in other sectors and so on, source, make, and deliver really is a great phrase. I think it really, if you're going to be in supply chains, and maybe if you want to go even further up in a company, understanding the sourcing side, understanding the manufacturing side, and understanding the delivery and therefore the customer side is a great way. If you can learn those things and understand them very clearly, that surely puts you in a great position to become, a COO and even a CEO in the future, I think. So that's some great advice you've given us over this conversation, and I think the thing about not being afraid to fail. I think everybody who you speak to, or every business book that I've read of some of the greatest business people in the world, have made so many failures, But as you said, it's how you pick yourself up, how you learn from it, and then move on to do what's next or what's better. Is perfect advice. So I think, we can almost go back to another point that you kind of covered throughout the whole discussion. Something that stood out for me is that keep on learning and having the right mindset. Is that a good thing to always have in your mind?
I can only respond with a yes. And look, it's learning about content, but sometimes it's not just about the what need to be resolved and solving problems in a structured manner. It's also with whom do you solve. There is a tremendous amount of complex problem we can't solve any longer by ourselves. Then it's about having the network, maintaining your network, or work cross-functional. In my own career development, look, I needed to get comfortable, not just where I worked, and it was various industry, it was also culturally, various countries, and you solve problems. And this cultural awareness is important as you go through the problem-solving process, because some cultures are more open, others treat it different. So I just want to say, solving problems, it's important that we like doing in operations and supply chain, but always consider the what part, what you can learn, what you can study, where you gain experience, and that's the how and with whom part. And that you build over time, and that makes you successful. There is a reason we have 2 ears, 1 mouth. Be good listeners, because quite often the organization even knows the problem and we ignore it. So that's why I'm a firm believer into continuous improvement and lean. There is a word, go to Gember, if you translate that, a Japanese word. It's really go to the point of impact. Be a listener and solve a problem, what makes it different for a frontline worker or with whom you talk. And don't solve only what gets addressed to you, because what gets addressed to you is quite often a pre-selected PowerPoint. We are somehow, it's assumed, but it's not fact-based. So leading with data, problem solving in a structured manner, and that cross-functional, I would say, I'm a firm believer into, and I would highly encourage that people join that journey, study supply chain, and be the next one in my own role and function with a supply chain background.
Excellent. And I think whatever happens, we talk about artificial intelligence and technology and robots and so on, but at the end of the day, I think still, for many years to come, the most important asset will be the people.
I can only agree to that, because I'm firmly believing into people first. And in Diebold Nixdorf, we even put that in a foundation of our strategic priorities. We put people first, and that is for sure, as we are an operational environment and more than 70% of companies' population reports into operations is under my leadership. I call it safety first, because if we can bring everyone safe in, remain safe during the day, and get them safe home to their family, we get the most and we enjoy most what we are doing. And then if we don't dilute that with any kind of negative quality, look, the result is outstanding, and the outstanding results to be delivered to customer, and they just love it. And if you do that well, the cost structure will follow, and you will outperform even on the profit and loss side.
Perfect. Okay, great message to end with. Thank you very much, Frank, for your time today, which are a very interesting and inspiring message for informing the next generation what they need to do, the current people how they should proceed, and the positivity of the importance of supply chain and how it will. It's a question of when, as opposed to if, it will reach the CEO level at the bigger company. So thank you very much for your time today, Frank. Thank you.
Louis, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.